Welcome back, everybody. We start now a new section of the course with a question. Which one of these can you not store on Amazon Simple Storage Service, S3? Is it the first episode of Star Trek Discovery? Is it the 300 petabyte data set containing proton collisions released by CERN? Is it a static page of a website, or is it an archived backup of your 2 terabyte hard disk? Which one can you not store as a single object in S3? All right, that's going to be quick. You seem to all agree. Why is that? Anybody? Yes? It has to be less than 50 terabytes, exactly. So that's the reason. 300 petabytes, you could do it, but you have to shard it into multiple pieces. By the way, did you see that now they're using AI to keep or not keep the data as soon as the collision occurs? So they launch the protons, they let them collide, and an AI is able to decide if the data is kept or not based on the instant analysis. All right. You can absolutely store episodes of Star Trek Discovery. That's not going to be the way Netflix does that, because it's actually chunked into just several seconds. But you could absolutely store it. It's just it's not going to be more than a terabyte. So that absolutely fits in S3. And then what's the best practice? Do you remember? Should you first try to scale out? So when it's slow, right? When things are slow, should you first try to scale out? And if it doesn't work, make the code better. If it doesn't work, scale up. Or first make the code better, then scale out, then scale up. Or first scale up, then scale out, then make the code better. Or the order doesn't play any role. You should just try everything. Okay, very good. So you listened. Very, very good. So indeed, first thought should be improve your code. You wouldn't believe what you can do with a single machine. And then you can buy more machines, and you can also scale up, but economically it's not the best solution. So you should scale up if really you feel that having bigger machines would help, but scaling out usually is the first thought. All right, so where are we? Let's zoom out, like precedently in Big Data for Engineers. So we've rehearsed relational databases in the first week. That's the week where you were either bored or scared, depending if you took information systems or engineers. We've looked into scaling out, which is to use multiple machines. We've seen object stores or cloud storage. You know how to store in Azure Blob Storage or in S3. And we've seen key value stores. Well, no, sorry, that we see in big data. I shouldn't have kept that. So we didn't see key value stores. Just know that they exist, and it was a hype and a big buzzword. We do not cover key value stores in Big Data for Engineers. Key value stores are basically a bit the same as object stores, but with very small objects, and that's technically a database system. You don't need to worry, it's not part of what we do here. So now what we are going to tackle is a different perspective. In the case of S3 and Azure Blob Storage, you're looking at a service available to the whole planet, the entire planet, with billions of terabyte files. That's basically how you can think of that. It's object storage, meaning you use object IDs, except Express-1 zones. And Azure Blob Storage also introduced the Azure Data Lake Storage that introduced directories, but the good old cloud storage is actually based on object storage. And then the key value model, not to be confused with key value stores, the key value model just means that you have this object ID and bucket ID that identifies an object, right? It's a flat naming convention. So that's called the key value model. We'll see the key value model all over the place in this course, so I'll show you every time we see it. Versus what's going to keep us busy today, file storage and block storage. And what we are doing now is storing millions, only millions, it's already a lot, but only millions of petabyte files that don't even fit on a machine. So less files, lower number, but absolutely huge, versus planet-weight storage with billions or trillions of objects that can be up to terabytes. So that's the very high-level way of putting that. One of the differences between the two is, again, that the one on the top is a planet-wide service. People just use it. The one on the bottom, you have to install it on your own cluster of machines, right? So the companies are going to have machines, have a cluster, and they are going to set up their own distributed file system that we'll discover today. All right, millions of petabytes files. That actually all started at Google in the 2000s because Google, like actually several other companies, started running out of bytes of storage. They didn't have, it was growing so large that it didn't even fit on single drives. So they invented the Google file system, GFS. So the Google file system is designed in a way that is fault tolerant in the sense that if you have a single laptop and a single hard drive, like most of you here, it might fail. Who has already had a whole crash of the hard drive? Nobody? Oh, some of you, right? So it might fail, but not always. Some of you were lucky. But now if you have a data center with thousands of machines, they will fail. It's just statistics. It's the law of large numbers. So in data centers, there are people whose full-time job is to go and swap pieces and components in machines, right? So the nodes will fail. So you have to design your file system in such a way that it's tolerant to that. So we have these fancy words that mean we need to monitor for errors, we need to detect. So there's something, they measure the time to detection. How much time does it take to detect an error by monitoring the system? Then there is the fixing, the recovery of the system. How do you fix it? And then that makes the system fault tolerant if that doesn't happen too often and it's manageable, right? So there's the time to detection, the time to fix, and the time between failures. That's the measures that people use. So we need a system that does that, that basically is resistant to drives failing all the time over and over again. Just before we go on the break, I'll finish with that slide. On your drive right here, it's random access. So if you use, I don't know, a word processor or a spreadsheet or whatever software you're using, it's just writing or reading to anywhere on the disk, right? Not so with what we are going to build now. It's not going to work in a random access way. It would work, but it would be extremely slow, awfully slow. It's meant to scan files, meaning that you have data and you just scan over it in order, for example, to analyze the data or aggregate, but typically the pattern, the access pattern, is you start at the beginning and then you read through the entire file. Or you do it in blocks, but I haven't talked about blocks yet, so I first need to talk about the blocks. So if you try to use a system like that with random access, it's just going to take forever, because every time you want to read somewhere, you need to wait for 100 milliseconds, and then you need to start somewhere else, again 100 milliseconds, that is just too slow. There's no way this is going to work. Which is the way why, by the way, page blobs in Azure Blob Storage were invented. It's exactly to solve that problem, right? But the regular distributed file systems, they are not efficient for random access. It's a break time, so we are going to take a break. We'll be back in 15 minutes, replenish our coffee supplies, and then continue on the distributed file system. And then you will know how we manage to store petabyte files, even though it doesn't fit on single disks.